Oh wow, retrospective review. Now, can you just so this is obviously Silent Hill 2006. What version did we watch? Because you sent me a very specific one. What one
Yes,
did you
the
send
version that I
me?
sent you, because there really is only one version of Silent Hill. There's like no
Hmm.
different cuts or anything like that. But the version that I hooked you up with is
Hmm.
the French Blu-ray edition, and not just any Blu-ray edition, but the
Ah.
version that has been color timed by director Xavier Gans himself, because
Hmm.
the American Blu-ray and the UK Blu-ray, none of them look quite right. Something happened in the transfer process where the color timing was subtly a little bit off. It's not something
Okay.
that you'll be able to tell if you watch the movie regularly, but
Hmm.
if you have two screens which are calibrated the same right next to each other, and you
You'll see
watch
it.
the standard UK or US release on one screen, and then you compare it with this
Hmm.
director approved transfer, you'll notice the difference. So literally, the version that I hooked you up with is the version with the director's own personally overseen color timing.
Hmm.
And
So,
to me, that's like a big deal, because I told you before that Silent Hill is perhaps not my favorite horror movie of all time, but it
oh, give
is
over.
right
You
up
love it.
there. I do love it. I do love it. And a part of that is because it's the perfect mix of audio and visuals. Because
So
to me,
I
it's a visual feast.
so I've just got to say that I watched this. I watched this afternoon before the literally 2 hours before the stream, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. But I watched this with a Sonos surround sound system, and I've got to tell you now, good Jesus Christ, that was amazing. The
Yeah,
sound
yeah.
was so good, so immersive, much better. Like the sound design, so much better. It reminds me of, and this is a compliment, but the latest season of Love, Death and Robots had such good sound on the Sonos, and it's seldom that shows and movies have good sound, like not to that degree to being, oh, I noticed that. Normally you just go, oh, it sounds good because it's surround sound, but when you really notice it, that's when you go, wow. And that, for an old film, 2006, blew me away. Like, actually blew me away. And my dog was even like, what's going on? Like, I'm hearing stuff. What's going on? Which, again, he doesn't normally do. Testament. The
Exactly.
sound
That's what I
design was
mean.
beautifully done.
Yeah, and that's what the movie is to me. It's an audio visual feast.
Mm,
It's a spectacle. I mean, I
mm,
have get like more joy out of watching Silent Hill and listening to it on a proper screen and with a proper sound system.
mm.
It's every bit or more immersive to me than Avatar is. And someone pointed out in the chat here, let's say, I believe it was Fedorevsky, who says the blacks are crushed and whites washed out on the British and US version. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like
Ah,
something is off with the
yeah.
contrast, with the color timing. All of that is perfect in the version that I sent you.
Mm,
In addition to, of course, the audio is spot on. And that is the big selling point to me. In terms of like story, mythology, it's all good. But it's the
mm,
experience, it's the perfection that has gone into
mm,
every single frame, into every single tone of the score. It's perfect in its
mm.
execution.
Yeah. I
That,
had,
to me, is the thing. But let's hear your review on Silent Hill, the movie.
yeah, no, I mean, I I remember, I mean, because we spoke about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember liking it, but I don't really remember it. And what I remember wasn't what happened, but part of it was. So I remember Sean Bean being a bit more involved. So maybe I'm blending it with another one, a second one. If he's in a second one, I don't know. Um, but I remember him being a bit more involved. But I tell you what surprised me about this, from my memory, was how it's such a female-led movie. I don't remember it being a female-led movie. No, that's not a bad thing. This is not me saying
No, it's the
anything
perfect thing.
detrimental about that.
It works
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
it was very good. And I you've got the likes of Laurie Holden, who I've been watching X-Files again lately, who I instantly recognize from X-Files. And I'm like, hey, it's the X-Files chick with a really long name that is almost comedic. But yeah, Rada Mitchell and Laurie Holt essentially are the two leads of this film. And they do such a good job. Very believable. And even the little girl, the actor who plays the little girl, pretty good, to be fair. Like, most child actors irritate me after a while. All of the acting was great. Sean Bean, he's barely in it, but he's great when he's in it. He has such screen presence as is. The score was fantastic. The score just seamlessly works with the sound design. So, and I think one of the things which, again, we talk about the audio-visual feast. It's not jump scares, but there's certain sound cues that keep you on edge as you're going through it. You know, the nap by the tree, they fall asleep at the tree, you know, the mother and the daughter, and then boom, a truck goes past and it's really loud. But it's those things, it's those subtle sound cues that wake you up into the movie and go, oh, well, what's going to happen next? Oh, what's going to happen next? It's not a jump scare, but it's to keep you, you know, a little bit sensitive to the sound and what's about to happen. Very smart. It's very, very smart. I really like the use of blues to greens. So the first part of the movie, there's a lot of blues and greens, and then we obviously go into you know, the more sort of Silent Hill area, and then the colors go obviously completely different. But the use of blues and greens on that was really, really nice. And I was genuinely surprised at how good the CGI was for an old film. I don't know if you remember it being good or not. I don't know when you last watched it, but I watched it today and I was like, you know what? That's actually pretty decent CGI for an old film, 2006. That's pretty decent.
There are a couple of shots where they were like a little bit more ambitious than they should have. I feel like a couple of the CGI shots are a little bit dated, but overall, it's really, really good. And where it does fail a little bit, it's not going to pull you out of the movie. So overall, incredibly well done. But again, but there you see like why I like this movie. It's the perfection in the execution. So it has a good story, great acting, great execution overall for an incredible experience.
Yeah, I tell you what I liked about the story specifically was its simplicity.
Yeah,
you know, and it's not necessarily, oh, this is a simple story. It's, you know, it sort of unpacks itself in a very simple way. It doesn't do needless exposition. We're introduced to the characters straight away. The issue at hand is unpacked pretty much straight away. We understand everyone's motivation, and boom, there you go. Go off. There's the story. It's very nicely done, quite seamlessly done, actually.
What I would say is that it's a very simple setup, and there's so much more to it. And because of that, it is complex, but it is not complicated, which sometimes is like a difficult balance. There are movies where they try to go for complex, but they just end up being complicated as they lose themselves in the story and in the narrative, especially when there's some kind of revelation, there's some kind of twist. Then you can either like lose your way in the narrative, over narrate or under narrate, whereas here it's just perfect because you have a very simple story, and what is behind it is a backstory with the mythology all of its own, and that's where the complexity comes into it. But still, you are drawn in by the relatively simple screen story, which is very easy to grasp. But of course, then it demands more of you to pay attention to the story and the mythology. And I have to say, I think they did a really, really good job at presenting it here for the movie, because I have never in my life played a Silent Hill video game. I'm a huge Sega Mega Drive fanboy, but I quit gaming for many, many years just as the PlayStation 1 was coming out, and when Silent Hill first hit the market. But I moved away from gaming at that point, and when I got back into gaming, I went straight back to the Mega Drive
Mm.
to retro gaming. So yeah, I've never played the games. I could not tell you how good it is compared to the games, or how much they changed. I have no idea. All I can comment on is how it works as a movie. And
Mm.
this, to me, is a fantastic movie. So, for anyone who likes to say there's never been a good video game adaptation to them, I will always say, no, 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 you're forgetting Silent Hill.
Well,
Don't
yeah,
know
because I mean,
how
it
it is
works.
as a video game adaptation, but it's
Mm.
a fantastic movie in its own right. You don't
Yeah.
have to be aware of the game. So this movie just works. It's such an underrated classic in my book.
Mm. Yeah, no, I would agree with you there completely. I was, yeah, I think as well. I was very, very impressed with the costume design. So Pyramid Head looked absolutely fantastic.
I know,
I think
right?
Pyramid Head looked fucking beast mode. Like you don't want to get in his way. And the sound again, it goes back to the sound, right? Audio visual feast. The sound of that sword scraping along things. Wow.
And what
It
a
gets under your skin.
visual! And
Mm.
not just him, but all of the creature designs and the
The
creature effects
nurses.
and everything. The nurses, the troll things without the arms, but
Yeah.
especially Pyramid Head. I
Yeah.
mean,
Pyramid Head was
what
sick.
a movie villain! Like I'm surprised that he isn't mentioned in the same breath as Jason and Freddy Krueger. I
Yeah, you're
think
right
that the
there.
movie must have been unfairly dismissed because
Mm.
it came from a video game, and many people maybe dismissed it
I
because of
think
that, didn't give it a chance.
I think maybe they didn't use him enough. If they had him come up a little bit more often in the movie, I think people probably would have gone, "Oh yeah, Pyramid Head, definitely." He's only
Yeah.
seen like, what was he in, like
Three
scenes? I
scenes,
think total.
yeah, 3 scenes in total,
Yeah,
and those 3 scenes they
but they're
stick with you.
great.
Because, my God, what an! But
The
at the same
sword through the
time,
door.
yeah. But I think that's perfect too, because he's
Yeah.
also the kind of character that if you have him in one scene too many, it's not
Mm.
going to work. And I have to admit, I've never actually seen the sequel, Silent Hill Revelation. I always heard that it's a piece of crap.
Mm.
Because it doesn't live up to this one in any way, shape, or form whatsoever.
Uh,
And I see no reason to check it out because the new Silent Hill movie coming, it's this director, and he's making
mm.
Silent Hill Part Two. So why waste time on that other one when and from what
Yeah,
I
makes sense.
understand, Pyramid Head, he has way too much screen presence in it, and he doesn't
Mm.
quite look right. Like they weren't able to replicate the look. And here's like the thing: this was the perfect director. Xavier Gens is perfect director for this because he has like this
Mm.
very unique, very French mentality and
Mm.
mise en scene and everything, and that is what this movie has. If you've seen some other French movies like Vidocq and other things, you kind of like you can see the legacy of how this movie came to be, and there's something quintessentially French horror, French fantasy about it in its execution, and it
Mm.
worked fantastically. But they weren't able to replicate it on the sequel without that director.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my my most recent French film sort of experience would have been Martyrs, which is just fucking. If you ever seen Martyrs,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean that's exactly
uh,
what I mean. Also very
Jesus,
fundamentally French.
yeah, massively so.
I disagreed with your interpretation of how Martyrs ended,
How
but
dare you? But speaking of French film, right, and it being sort of quintessentially French, I think that also goes right down to the cinematography of this film. So Silent
yes,
Hill, the cinematography is very unique, more so than just an average Hollywood film. You know, you look at some of the framing choices, you're like, oh, like the framing choices where she turns down the alley and the lights go out, and then she lights her lighter. All of that very unusual framing. It's good framing, it's artistic, but it's unusual framing. It's not stuff you would ordinarily see. I don't know what again, but also I think that's probably in part why Pyramid Head looks so good. is because the way they framed him in the
Yeah,
shots. There are
yeah.
some shots where Pyramid Head just looks just mental. You're like, whoa, because of how it's framed. I think they did such a good job there. Such a good job.
They did indeed. Amazing job.
Yeah.
And because, like, Pyramid Head, like, you know our good friend Paul Chato, he's Canoe Head. Guy with a canoe on his head, comes from like a series of sketches with like guys like Microwave for Head and something. And Pyramid Head, you would think fits right in there. And in the video game, yeah, he looks cool, but not as amazing in the video. Or as in the movie, because that to me was so amazing that this director, he was able to take all of the visuals from the video game, even those that came from technical restrictions, and just make them work in the movie. Like, for instance, the fog in the video game, the fog. You know why that was in the video game?
No.
Because this is the same thing with like the first Spider-Man game for the PlayStation. There was fog in that one too, because at the time you didn't have the processing capability to like render out all of the backgrounds and everything in perfect
So you
detail.
keep it foggy, so
you wanted. You make it foggy, then you have like an in-continuity reason for why you don't have to use so much processing power on the backgrounds. So that was like the necessary thing because of the game technology at the time. So then the game designers, they incorporated that into the game story, and then they just run wild with it here in the movie. They didn't have to.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do that. They could have gone a different direction. But to me, that was also a fantastic way just to juxtapose the different worlds, that you're in some kind of like parallel dimension, which isn't really hit home until the end of the movie, which to me is one of the most striking endings in any movie ever, especially dealing with like parallel timelines and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the story, I guess, and how it sort of wraps itself up at the end. I mean, do you think that's a satisfying end? What do you interpret the end being?
My interpretation of the end, and again, I'm not familiar with the games. I have never played the games. I don't really know the story of the games. I have only seen this movie, and it could very well be that my interpretation is warped and is even incorrect because I don't know the games. But my interpretation is that because of all of the events of Silent Hill, it wasn't just that multiple versions of the character at the center of it all was created, but it was such a traumatic thing that it gave rise to a ghost dimension, a parallel universe of sorts. So when you step into Silent Hill in the right conditions, and just typically if you're with like one of these characters, you're not just going to step into Silent Hill, you're going to step out of our universe and our dimension. No, not our universe, but you'll just step out of our dimension, just a little bit out of sync with our reality. So you're still there physically, but on a slightly different plane of existence. And that is kind of like where you see like the main story of Silent Hill. It is just on a different frequency. So if you and I were to go to Silent Hill, as the police in the movie did, there was nothing there. Just don't be there and breathe too much for too long and you'll be fine. There's no ash, there's nothing like that. That's in this other, slightly off frequency dimension. And that's where the thing takes place. And the really scary Lovecraftian element of it for me is that once you get in there, maybe there's a way out, but the leads of the movie, the ones we follow, they didn't get out. They're still trapped there. But it's just a frequency difference, because you saw when they left Silent Hill, the fog didn't lift. The fog was still there. Which only goes to show that the whole world is like that, because they're in this other frequency. They're slightly phase shifted to a different dimension. So their presence is partially in our world, but because of the difference, you can't really feel it. We saw that towards the very end, which to me is so striking. They drive home, but off
Yeah,
frequency,
all the way
so
home. Yeah.
everything follows them there. They even go into the house, and they can
Yeah.
feel right there. We can't see him, but right there is my husband and your adoptive father. We can sense him there. And then we go back
Yeah.
to our reality, where you see the and I love this contrast. So like the air was dirty with the soot and everything in our world. It was raining. It was cleansed. It was green. It was pure. It was being washed. And then juxtaposed against them being in the living room, watching the empty couch because they feel this presence. Then you see in our world that he is there, and he suddenly
laying on the
feels
couch.
they're here watching me, and he turns around and he's confused. They're not there because he feels their presence. So they are, and that to me was like so compelling. Like they're so close, they can literally touch each other, but they can feel each other's presence, but they're still so far away because they're just operate in different frequencies, and because of that, they're effectively in different worlds.
I sort of saw it as almost like a purgatory sort of situation, like they'd almost died, because there was the thing where Laurie Holden's police officer, when she's seen by the mother, Rose, I think the character's name is she's like, oh, you know, your head's bleeding. And I'm like, oh, maybe both of them crashed, you know, when they entered into Silent Hill. And because they died in Silent Hill, the area where the power was, they entered this sort of purgatory realm. So similar to what you said, but they'd entered into it by that way. That was my sort of interpretation from it, because there's some sort of subtle cues-ish to that.
There's some subtle cues, and you could be right. You could be right, but I prefer. I still, because if they were dead, how would the still very much living father feel their presence? So
well, no, you're right, because also
that they're just fate shifted.
Yeah, no, you're right. Actually, there's a hole in my my explanation anyway, because there was no car and there was no bodies either, so I'm completely wrong. But it was just the fact that they bumped their heads. Both of them very clearly bumped their heads, because she smashed her head into the wheel of the car, sort of crashed through there, and then as the cop,
what I think happened there.
Well.
My interpretation was that they were jolted around as they were face shifted, as their whole bodies and their corporal beings, something happened to them. The best I can give is an episode of Star Trek where someone were face shifted, which means that they could see everyone in our world, but they couldn't interact. They went straight through everything, and they were invisible to everyone. They were functionally ghosts. They were still there. It's just that the frequency that their atoms worked on were just slightly shifted to work on a different frequency, and that's what I kind of like think happened here, that they were just slightly phase shifted, but as that happened, there was a jolt, and that jolt is what caused them all to crash and everything.
Yeah, I like that. I like that one. I mean, all in all, a thoroughly enjoyable film. Thanks for making me watch it again, because I was like, yeah, I think I remember it being all right. Yeah, can't really remember though. So,
but it holds up pretty well, doesn't it? Because like now, it's a movie that is now more than 15 years old, which is scary because I remember watching it in theaters, being blown away by it then, and I got every version of it since. But I will say that it holds up incredibly well. And it's every single bit as good now as it was when it was released. I mean, if anything, it's better now, because now every other movie is so shit.
Yeah, no, you're right. It really does hold up. I mean, having watched it today on a relatively large TV with good sound system, like you'd think that a lot of the weaknesses would be quite glaring on, a high-end system, but there wasn't anything that jumped out at me where I'm like, oh, this is bad, or oh, this is bad. It was just all generally really good.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. So nice to do a little retrospective for Halloween. I thought we'd do that. Got to talk about horror at least once. Do you have anything else to add to the Silent Hill retrospective chit chat?
Only that for those of you watching who haven't seen it yet, go check out Silent Hill. And if you can, if you ever have the opportunity to buy the French Blu-ray that is approved by director Xavier Gans himself, that's the one you want. It is very English friendly, because while it was made in France for a French audience, they know that the movie has an international fan base. So just like the Germans do with their amazing special editions for Blu-ray and 4K releases, like they're the best on the planet. They know there's an international market here, so the releases are very English friendly.
Yeah, check it out. The one you sent was very, very good. I enjoyed it very much.